What's up everyone, my name is Jack Murphy, and in this video I'm going over 2 dividend ETFs I just bought in my dividend portfolio. In my dividend portfolio I want it to be a mix of stocks and ETFs, and right now it's a lot more stocks than ETFs, so I want to start incorporating some more ETFs in the portfolio to help diversify it a little more. So in this video I'm going over 2 new ones I bought, and I think they're pretty cool, so let's get into it. So the first ETF that I bought was VYM, the Vanguard High Yield Dividend ETF, and it tracks the FTSE High Yield Dividend Index. Before I go over its dividend stats, I'm going to look at its composition. As you can see, it focuses in financials, consumer staples, and industrials, and also has a pretty high percentage of healthcare, but then it does cover a wide variety of sectors as well. And its top 10 positions are pretty well-known companies like JP Morgan, Broadcom, Exxon, Johnson & Johnson, Home Depot, Procter & Gamble, etc. It's clearly got good companies in its portfolio. Those were the top 10 stocks, but VYM has a total of 449 stocks total in the ETF, so it is well diversified, even more than those top 10. If we go over to its performance, we can see it does pretty well. Since it was made in 2006, it's averaged about an 8.11% return, and in the last 10 years, it's had about a 9.3% return. The last 5 years, it's been doing really well at almost an 11% return, and last 3 years, it's averaged about 10.2% return. These are all high returns considering it also has a pretty good dividend yield. So speaking of that, let's go and look at the dividend stats. I'm going to take us over to Seeking Alpha because I kind of like the layout of that better than Vanguard's. So if we look at their dividend yield, it's about 3.15%. Anything in that 3 to 4 range is pretty high in my opinion. Their 5-year growth rate is only about 5.59%. But the CTF also does get good returns, so I'm not too concerned about a lower 5-year growth rate. And they've had dividend growth for 13 years, which is not a dividend aristocrat or anything, but it is pretty good. Oh, I almost forgot to mention that the expense ratio is 0.06, so that means if I were to invest $10,000, I would only pay $6 in fees, which is nice and low how we like it. Okay, so now let's move on to the second ETF, VIG, the Vanguard Dividend Appreciation ETF, and this one focuses a little less on the dividends and a little more on price appreciation, but in my opinion has a good blend of both, so that's why I like it in my portfolio. VIG's composition is mostly information technology at almost a quarter of it, industrials, healthcare, financials, and consumer staples. And if we look at their top 10 stocks, it starts with Microsoft, then Apple, then JP Morgan, then United Health Group, Broadcom, ExxonMobil, Visa, etc. Especially those top 2 positions, you can already see Microsoft and Apple. Those stocks are more growth and have very small dividends. That's where we get the appreciation side of the ETF from. And besides those stocks, the entire portfolio is made up of 315 total, so also well diversified. So let's look at the performance and see if they're actually higher growth than the other ETF. Since inception in 2006, about the same time as the other ETF, they're averaging about a 9.37% return. That's obviously higher than the other ETF. So in the same time, they are getting more price appreciation. In the last 10 years, they've been averaging about 10.7%. The last 5 years, they've been doing really great at about a 13.84% average yearly return. In the last 3 years, they've averaged about an 8.48%. In the last year, their annual return was about 14.46%, which is pretty significant. I almost forgot to mention that the expense ratio is 0.06, which is nice and low how we like it. With that being said, let's move on to the dividend stats because that's still important when I'm talking about dividend ETFs. Once again, moving over to Seeking Alpha, and as you can see, their dividend yield is around a 1.88%. Still lower than the other one, but that's still not a bad dividend percent whatsoever. And I always say don't get too focused on the dividend yields, more of the quality of the stock or ETF you're buying. They also got a pretty decent 5-year growth rate, about a 9.5%, and they've got about 10 years of dividend growth. Those are still pretty respectable dividend stats in my opinion. So those are the 2 ETFs I just added, and I'm only buying 1 share of each of them right now because I still want to keep some money on the sideline for good opportunities. But my plan with these ETFs is whenever I don't really have good stocks to buy at a good discount, I'm probably going to just put my money into the ETFs so I still have something to dollar cost average in, and I just want to expand my ETF side of the portfolio as well because before this it only had SCHD and JEPI. Still good dividend ETFs, but I also want to diversify my ETF side of the portfolio. So I'm going to keep adding more ETFs to the portfolio throughout 2024. Those were just the first 2 additions. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. That's all for now. Thank you guys for watching. Peace.